Elena Kozlova grew up in a small village outside Moscow where hunting was not just a hobby, but a way of survival. Her father, a former military officer, taught her to shoot when she was only 8 years old. While other girls her age played with dolls, Elena spent her afternoons learning to read wind patterns and calculate distances. Her father noticed something special about his daughter's abilities. She could hit targets that even experienced hunters missed. By the time Elena turned 16, she could outshoot every man in her village. Her reputation spread to neighboring towns, but nobody took her seriously. They saw her as just a girl with a lucky streak. The local military recruiting office laughed when her father suggested they consider Elena for sniper training. Women belonged in support roles, they said, not on the front lines with rifles. Elena didn't let their dismissal discourage her. She continued practicing every day, pushing herself to hit targets at longer and longer distances. She studied ballistics, weather patterns, and physics on her own. Her bedroom walls were covered with charts showing bullet trajectories and wind calculations. While her friends talked about boys and fashion, Elena dreamed of proving herself as a real sniper. When Elena turned 18, tensions between nations were rising. Intelligence reports suggested that rogue groups were trying to acquire nuclear materials. The government was secretly recruiting the best marksmen in the country, but they still refused to consider women. Elena applied anyway, knowing she would be rejected. She was right, but she kept applying every few months. During this time, Elena worked at a local gun shop where she met retired military personnel. One old sergeant named Victor recognized her exceptional skills. He had seen many snipers during his career, and Elena's natural ability impressed him. Victor began training Elena in advanced techniques that weren't taught in basic military programs. He showed her how to remain invisible for hours, how to control her breathing and heartbeat, and how to make impossible shots under extreme pressure. Victor also taught Elena about the mental side of sniping. He explained that the best snipers weren't just good shooters. They were patient, intelligent, and could stay calm in life-or-death situations. Elena absorbed every lesson. She practiced meditation to control her mind, and studied military strategy to understand how snipers fit into larger operations. One winter morning, Elena demonstrated her skills to a group of visiting military officials who came to the gun shop. They were testing new rifle equipment and needed someone to help with the demonstration. Elena volunteered, and the officials reluctantly agreed. They set up targets at various distances, expecting Elena to miss the longer shots. Elena surprised everyone by hitting every target perfectly, including ones placed at distances the officials thought were impossible for the equipment they were testing. Her shots were so precise that the officials initially suspected the targets had been tampered with. They set up new targets and watched Elena repeat her performance. The lead official, Colonel Petrov, quietly took notes about Elena's abilities. After the demonstration, Colonel Petrov approached Elena privately. He explained that the military was facing unusual challenges that required unconventional solutions. While he couldn't offer Elena an official position, he might be able to arrange special training opportunities. Elena eagerly accepted, not knowing that this conversation would change her life forever. 3 months later, Elena received a mysterious phone call instructing her to report to a remote training facility. She arrived to find herself among a small group of elite marksmen, all men who initially resented her presence. The training was unlike anything Elena had experienced. They practiced shooting in extreme weather conditions, from moving vehicles and while under intense pressure. The instructors pushed Elena harder than the male recruits, expecting her to fail. Instead, she excelled at every challenge. Her scores consistently ranked among the top 3 in the group. Slowly, her fellow trainees began to respect her abilities. They realized that Elena wasn't there because of special treatment. She had earned her place through pure skill. During advanced training, Elena learned about classified military operations and international threats. The instructors explained that modern warfare often required precision strikes that could prevent larger conflicts. One sniper shot could sometimes accomplish what an entire army could not. Elena understood that she was being prepared for missions that would never appear in official records. The final test came after 6 months of intense training. Each recruit had to demonstrate their skills in a simulated combat scenario. Elena's test involved neutralizing multiple targets while avoiding detection in a complex urban environment. She completed the mission flawlessly, achieving the highest score in the program's history. After graduation, Elena was assigned to a special operations unit that didn't officially exist. Her teammates were the best soldiers from various military branches, all sworn to secrecy about their missions. Elena was the only woman in the unit, but her reputation for exceptional shooting had preceded her. The team leader, Major Volkov, briefed Elena on their primary mission, preventing nuclear materials from falling into the wrong hands. Elena's first few assignments involved gathering intelligence and providing overwatch for other team members. She proved herself reliable and deadly accurate in high-pressure situations. Her ability to remain calm and make precise shots under extreme stress impressed even the most experienced soldiers. They began requesting Elena specifically for their most critical missions. As Elena gained experience, she started noticing patterns in the intelligence reports they received. Various criminal organizations and terrorist groups were actively seeking nuclear materials. The threat was more serious than most people realized. Elena understood that her skills might soon be needed to prevent a catastrophe that could affect millions of innocent people. Elena spent her free time studying nuclear facilities and security protocols. She learned about the different types of nuclear materials and how they could be weaponized. This knowledge would prove crucial when she eventually faced the most important shot of her career. For now, she continued training and preparing, unaware that her moment to change history was rapidly approaching. Intelligence reports started coming in about a dangerous criminal organization called the Shadow Collective. They had been attempting to purchase nuclear materials from corrupt officials in several countries. The group's leader, Dmitry Volkov, was a former nuclear engineer who had been dismissed from his government position for selling classified information. Now he led a network of criminals who specialized in acquiring and selling weapons of mass destruction. Elena's unit received orders to monitor the Shadow Collective's activities. Their mission was to gather information and prevent any nuclear materials from being successfully transferred. Elena studied photographs and profiles of all known members of the organization. She memorized their faces, habits, and typical meeting locations. Her role would be to provide sniper support if negotiations or arrests went wrong. The first major operation took place in an abandoned warehouse district. Intelligence suggested that Volkov was meeting with a corrupt military officer who had access to small amounts of nuclear material. Elena positioned herself on a rooftop 800 meters from the meeting location. Through her scope, she watched as several cars arrived and men in expensive suits gathered in the warehouse. The operation was supposed to be a simple surveillance mission, but everything went wrong when local police accidentally discovered the meeting. Gunfire erupted as Volkov's men tried to escape. Elena received orders to prevent Volkov from leaving with a briefcase that supposedly contained nuclear material samples. She tracked Volkov through her scope as he ran between buildings, but friendly forces were too close for her to take the shot safely. Volkov escaped that night, but Elena's unit recovered the briefcase. Laboratory analysis confirmed their worst fears. The briefcase contained genuine weapons-grade uranium samples. This meant that Volkov had access to larger quantities and was actively trying to sell them to the highest bidders. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was immediate and deadly serious. Over the following weeks, Elena participated in several more operations targeting the Shadow Collective. Each mission revealed more disturbing information about the scope of their activities. They had connections to terrorist groups in multiple countries and were negotiating deals that could provide enough nuclear material to build several crude bombs. Elena began to understand that preventing nuclear terrorism had become her unit's primary responsibility. During one mission, Elena had to take her first confirmed kill. A Shadow Collective operative was about to execute a captured government informant who had been providing crucial intelligence. Elena's shot from 900 meters saved the informant's life and allowed her unit to capture valuable documents about upcoming nuclear material transfers. The shot was clean and professional, but Elena felt the weight of taking a human life. The captured documents revealed that Volkov was planning something called Operation Blackout. The details were coded, but intelligence analysts determined that it involved a major nuclear material acquisition scheduled for the following month. The location appeared to be somewhere in the mountains near the border, but the exact site remained unknown. Elena's unit was tasked with finding and stopping this operation. Elena spent days studying satellite images of the border region. She identified several possible locations where such a meeting could take place. Each site presented unique challenges for sniper operations due to the mountainous terrain and extreme distances involved. Elena calculated shooting angles and wind patterns for all potential locations, preparing for multiple scenarios. The breakthrough came when intelligence intercepted communications between Volkov and his contacts. They were planning to meet at an abandoned mining facility high in the mountains. The location was perfect for their purposes because it was remote, difficult to access, and had multiple escape routes. For Elena's unit, it presented enormous challenges because the facility could only be approached from certain directions without being detected. Elena studied the mining facility's layout extensively. The main buildings were situated in a valley surrounded by steep mountain slopes. The only practical position for a sniper would be on a ridge approximately 7,000 meters from the facility. This distance was far beyond what most snipers ever attempted, but Elena calculated that it was theoretically possible with the right equipment and perfect conditions. Major Volkov's briefing revealed the full scope of Operation Blackout. Intelligence suggested that Volkov was selling enough nuclear material to build multiple dirty bombs to a terrorist organization planning attacks on major cities. The transfer was scheduled to happen during a winter storm that would provide natural cover from satellite surveillance. Elena's unit would be the only force in position to stop the transfer. The team spent a week preparing for the mission. Elena received a specially modified rifle capable of extreme long-range shots. She practiced with the weapon daily, adjusting for the high altitude and extreme cold conditions they would face in the mountains. The margin for error would be virtually zero. Elena would have only one chance to prevent the nuclear material from falling into terrorist hands. Elena also prepared mentally for what might be the most important shot of her career. She studied meditation techniques to maintain calm under extreme pressure. She practiced breathing exercises that would help her remain steady during the long wait in freezing mountain conditions. Elena understood that the success or failure of the entire mission might depend on her ability to make an impossible shot. 2 days before the mission, Elena received additional intelligence that made the stakes even higher. The terrorist organization buying the nuclear material was planning to use it in attacks on multiple cities during an upcoming international summit. Millions of innocent lives could be lost if Elena failed to stop the transfer. The pressure was enormous, but Elena focused on her training and preparation. Elena's teammates expressed concern about the extreme distance of the shot she would need to make. 7,000 meters was beyond the range that most military manuals considered possible for accurate sniper fire. Elena acknowledged their concerns but remained confident in her abilities. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life, even if she hadn't known it at the time. The night before leaving for the mountains, Elena cleaned and checked her equipment one final time. She reviewed weather forecasts and calculated wind patterns for the target area. Every detail had to be perfect because there would be no second chances. Elena tried to sleep, knowing that the next day would test every skill she had developed over years of training and preparation. The helicopter dropped Elena's team at a remote landing zone, 15 kilometers from the target location. The mountain air was thin and bitterly cold, with snow falling steadily. Elena carried her specialized rifle and enough supplies to remain in position for up to 3 days. The weight of the equipment was substantial, but her years of training had prepared her for such physical demands. The team moved through the mountains during darkness to avoid detection. Elena followed Major Volkov and 3 other team members along a treacherous path that wound through rocky terrain and dense forests. They had to move slowly and carefully because a single mistake could cause a fatal fall or alert enemy scouts to their presence. Elena's breath formed clouds in the freezing air as she concentrated on each step. After 6 hours of difficult hiking, the team reached Elena's shooting position on a high ridge overlooking the target valley. The abandoned mining facility was visible far below, appearing tiny through the falling snow. Elena used high-powered binoculars to study the buildings and identify the best target areas. The distance was even more intimidating in person than it had appeared on maps and satellite images. Elena began setting up her shooting position while her teammates established a small observation post nearby. She cleared snow from a flat area and arranged camouflage materials to hide her location from enemy observation. The specialized rifle, required careful assembly and calibration for the extreme range and weather conditions. Every adjustment had to be precise because there would be no opportunity to test-fire the weapon. The rifle Elena carried was a custom-built weapon designed specifically for ultra-long-range shooting. It fired specially manufactured ammunition with enhanced ballistic properties. The scope was one of the most advanced targeting systems available, capable of calculating range, wind speed, and other environmental factors automatically. However, at 7,000 meters, even the best equipment required exceptional skill to achieve accuracy. While Elena prepared her equipment, she monitored radio communications from her teammates positioned around the valley. They reported vehicle movements and personnel activity at the mining facility. Intelligence had been correct. Volkov and his associates were preparing for a major meeting. Several trucks had arrived carrying what appeared to be heavy equipment or materials under protective coverings. Elena spent the first day observing and taking measurements. She recorded wind patterns at different times, noted how the weather affected visibility, and identified the exact locations where targets were most likely to appear. The temperature dropped significantly after sunset, creating additional challenges for maintaining equipment function and personal comfort. Elena rotated between active observation and rest periods to maintain alertness. During the second day, more vehicles arrived at the facility. Elena counted at least 20 people moving between the buildings, including several who matched photographs of known terrorists from intelligence files. Through her scope, she could see that they were unloading metallic containers that were probably containing the nuclear materials. The operation was proceeding exactly as intelligence had predicted. Elena established radio contact with her command center to report her observations. The decision was made to wait until the actual transfer meeting took place before taking action. This would ensure that both the nuclear materials and the key criminals were present when Elena took her shot. The waiting was mentally challenging, but Elena focused on maintaining her physical condition and equipment readiness. On the afternoon of the second day, Elena noticed increased activity around the main building of the facility. Vehicles were being positioned in specific patterns, and guards were taking up positions around the perimeter. Elena recognized these as preparation activities for an important meeting. She notified her teammates and began final preparations for what would likely be her opportunity to take the critical shot. Elena checked her rifle's calibration one more time and reviewed her range calculations. At 7,000 meters, the bullet would take approximately 8 seconds to reach the target. During that time, wind conditions could change, targets could move, and dozens of variables could affect the shot's accuracy. Elena had practiced for these conditions, but she had never attempted such an extreme shot in a real combat situation. As evening approached, a convoy of black vehicles arrived at the facility. Elena observed through her scope as men in expensive, winter clothing emerged from the cars and entered the main building. One of them was definitely Dmitry Volkov, the Shadow Collective leader. Elena could also see several individuals who matched descriptions of the terrorist organization's representatives. The meeting that could determine the fate of millions was about to begin. Elena radioed her observations to Major Volkov in the command center. She received confirmation that the mission was authorized to proceed. Elena would wait for the optimal moment when all key targets were visible and the nuclear materials were being transferred. Only then would she take the shot that could prevent a nuclear catastrophe. Elena controlled her breathing and heart rate using techniques she had learned during training. The shot would require absolute steadiness and perfect timing. She adjusted her scope for the current weather conditions and double-checked her calculations. Everything had to be perfect because Elena would have only one opportunity to prevent the nuclear materials from falling into terrorist hands. Through her scope, Elena could see people moving inside the main building through partially covered windows. The meeting appeared to be in progress, but she needed a clear shot at either Volkov or the person carrying the nuclear materials. Elena waited patiently, knowing that rushing the shot would likely result in failure and potentially catastrophic consequences for international security. As darkness fell, lights came on inside the facility buildings. This provided better visibility of the targets but also created shadows and glare that could affect Elena's shot accuracy. She adjusted her scope settings and continued monitoring the situation. Elena estimated that she would have her opportunity within the next few hours, when the transfer actually took place. Elena's teammates reported increased radio traffic from the facility, suggesting that the meeting was reaching its conclusion. Soon the nuclear materials would be handed over to the terrorists and they would disperse to different locations. Once that happened, stopping them would become exponentially more difficult. Elena prepared herself mentally for what would be the most important shot of her career and possibly one of the most significant sniper shots in history. The weight of responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders as she realized that millions of innocent lives depended on her ability to make an impossible shot under extreme conditions. She had trained for this moment throughout her career, but nothing could completely prepare someone for such enormous pressure. Elena focused on her breathing and tried to empty her mind of everything, except the technical aspects of the shot she would soon need to make. 3 months after the mountain operation, Elena received orders to report to military headquarters in Moscow. She assumed this was for a routine debriefing about the classified mission, but instead found herself facing a panel of the country's highest-ranking military officials. The room was filled with generals and intelligence directors who rarely appeared in the same place at the same time. The panel's leader, General Antonov, explained that Elena's 7,000-meter shot had created ripple effects throughout the international intelligence community. Foreign governments were asking questions about how such an impossible shot had been achieved, and some were demanding access to the technology or personnel responsible. Elena realized that her success had created diplomatic complications that extended far beyond the original mission. General Antonov revealed that the nuclear materials Elena had helped recover contained isotopic signatures that traced back to 3 different countries. This discovery had exposed a massive international network of nuclear material trafficking that involved corrupt officials from multiple governments. Elena's shot had not only prevented a terrorist attack, but it also uncovered a global security threat that authorities were still investigating. The investigation into the nuclear trafficking network had revealed connections to organized crime groups, corrupt military officials, and even some government agencies that were supposed to be protecting nuclear materials. Elena learned that her mission had been part of a larger operation that was still ongoing. The Shadow Collective had been just one part of a much larger criminal organization that was actively selling weapons of mass destruction to the highest bidders. Elena was informed that her identity and role in the mountain operation had become known to hostile intelligence services. Several foreign governments and criminal organizations were actively trying to identify and recruit or eliminate the sniper who had made the legendary 7,000-meter shot. Elena's life was now in constant danger from people who either wanted to use her abilities or prevent her from using them again. The security briefing included details about multiple assassination attempts that had been planned against Elena. Foreign intelligence services had identified her as a strategic asset that needed to be eliminated or captured. Elena learned that her apartment had been under surveillance for weeks, and several attempts to kidnap her had been prevented by security forces she hadn't even known were protecting her. General Antonov offered Elena 2 choices. She could be relocated to a secure facility, where she would continue serving in a military capacity but would essentially disappear from the world, or she could be given a new identity in civilian life in exchange for never using her sniper skills again. Both options meant leaving behind everything and everyone she had ever known. Elena asked for time to consider her options, but General Antonov explained that the decision had to be made immediately. Intelligence reports indicated that another assassination attempt was planned for that evening, and Elena could not return to her normal life under any circumstances. She had become too valuable and too dangerous to remain in the open. Elena chose to continue serving in the military. Accepting that her old life was over, she was immediately transferred to a classified facility where she would undergo advanced training and preparation for missions that were even more sensitive than her previous work. Elena understood that she would never again have a normal life, but she accepted this sacrifice as the price of her exceptional abilities. The new facility was unlike anything Elena had experienced during her previous military service. It was staffed by the most elite soldiers and intelligence operatives from multiple countries, all working together on threats that individual nations could not handle alone. Elena learned that she would be part of an international team dedicated to preventing nuclear terrorism and weapons proliferation Elena's training at the new facility focused on scenarios that were even more challenging than the mountain operation. She practiced shots at distances exceeding 10,000 meters and learned to operate in environments ranging from Arctic conditions to tropical jungles. The training was designed to prepare her for missions anywhere in the world under any conceivable conditions. During her training, Elena met other operatives who had made similar sacrifices for international security. She learned that there were people from many countries who had given up their normal lives to work on preventing catastrophic threats that the public never knew existed. Elena realized that she was now part of a secret community dedicated to protecting humanity from its most dangerous elements. Elena's first mission with the international team involved preventing another nuclear trafficking operation in Southeast Asia. Intelligence had identified a group attempting to sell nuclear materials to several terrorist organizations simultaneously. Elena's role would be to provide sniper support for a complex operation involving forces from 4 different countries. The Southeast Asia mission required Elena to operate in tropical conditions that were completely different from the mountain environment, where she had made her legendary shot. She had to adjust her techniques for high humidity, extreme heat, and dense jungle vegetation. Elena spent weeks preparing for the environmental challenges, while also studying the specific targets and operational requirements. The mission was successful, but Elena realized that preventing nuclear terrorism was becoming increasingly difficult as criminal organizations learned from previous failures. The groups they were fighting were becoming more sophisticated and were taking greater precautions to avoid the kind of long-range sniper attacks that Elena specialized in performing. Elena began working with military engineers to develop new equipment and techniques for ultra-long-range shooting. Her experience with the 7,000-meter shot had provided valuable data about the limits of current technology. Elena's input was used to design improved rifles, ammunition, and targeting systems that would be effective at even greater distances. Between missions, Elena continued training and developing her skills. She realized that the mountain operation had been just the beginning of her career as an international operative. Elena accepted that she would spend the rest of her life working to prevent threats that most people would never know existed. But she found satisfaction in knowing that her abilities were being used to protect innocent people. Elena also began training other snipers in the advanced techniques she had developed. She discovered that teaching forced her to understand her own abilities more clearly and helped her develop new methods for achieving extreme accuracy under difficult conditions. Elena's students came from military forces around the world, all sworn to the same secrecy that governed her own life. As Elena adapted to her new life, she often thought about the people whose lives had been saved by her shot in the mountains. She would never know their names or meet them personally, but Elena knew that millions of people were alive because of her actions. This knowledge gave meaning to the sacrifices she had made and motivated her to continue developing her abilities for future missions. Elena understood that her story would never be told publicly and that history would never record her contribution to preventing nuclear terrorism. However, she found peace in knowing that sometimes the most important work happened in silence and secrecy. Elena had accepted her role as a guardian against threats that existed in the shadows of international relations. At exactly 9:47 p.m., Elena observed movement outside the main building. Several men emerged carrying a metallic briefcase that intelligence had identified as the container for the nuclear materials. Through her scope, Elena could see Dmitry Volkov walking alongside 2 men who matched the photographs of the terrorist organization's leaders. This was the moment she had been waiting for during 2 days of freezing surveillance. Elena made final adjustments to her scope and checked wind conditions one last time. The snow had stopped falling, providing clearer visibility, but the wind had increased slightly. At 7,000 meters, even a small change in wind speed could cause her bullet to miss by several meters. Elena used her training to calculate the precise adjustments needed for the current conditions. Through her radio, Elena heard Major Volkov's voice giving her final authorization to take the shot. The decision had been made at the highest levels of government that stopping this nuclear transfer was worth the risk of an ultra-long-range shot that had never been attempted under combat conditions. Elena acknowledged the authorization and prepared to fire. Elena focused her scope on Volkov, who was holding the briefcase containing the nuclear materials. The distance was so extreme that Volkov appeared tiny in her scope, barely larger than a pinhead. Elena had to rely on her scope's electronic systems to identify the exact target point. She controlled her breathing and waited for the perfect moment when all conditions aligned. The moment came when Volkov stopped walking and turned to shake hands with one of the terrorist leaders. Elena had a clear shot with minimal target movement for approximately 10 seconds. She exhaled slowly, held her breath, and squeezed the trigger with the precise pressure she had practiced thousands of times during training. The rifle fired with a thunderous crack that echoed across the mountains. Elena immediately began tracking the bullet's path through her scope, counting the seconds until impact. At 7,000 meters, the bullet would take approximately 8 seconds to reach the target. Elena watched Volkov continue his conversation, completely unaware that his fate was already sealed by a bullet traveling toward him through the cold mountain air. 8 seconds after Elena fired, she saw Volkov suddenly collapse. The briefcase fell from his hands and scattered its contents across the snow. Elena had achieved what military experts would later call one of the most remarkable sniper shots in recorded history. The bullet had traveled 7,000 meters through difficult weather conditions and struck its target with lethal precision. Chaos erupted at the facility as Volkov's associates realized what had happened. Men scattered in all directions, some taking cover behind vehicles while others attempted to recover the scattered nuclear materials. Elena could see muzzle flashes as the terrorists began firing wildly into the mountains, trying to locate her position. Their shots fell harmlessly short of Elena's concealed location on the distant ridge. Elena's teammates immediately began coordinating the follow-up assault on the facility. With Volkov eliminated and the nuclear materials scattered, the terrorist organization's plan had been completely disrupted. However, Elena's mission was not complete until all the nuclear materials were secured and the remaining terrorists were captured or eliminated. Elena continued providing sniper support as her teammates and additional military units moved toward the facility. From her elevated position, she could observe the entire battlefield and identify threats that ground forces couldn't see. Elena took several additional shots at terrorists attempting to escape with portions of the nuclear materials, successfully preventing their escape. The battle at the facility lasted for 3 hours. Elena remained in her sniper position throughout the engagement, providing critical support to the assault teams. Her ability to observe the entire area and eliminate specific threats was crucial to the operation's success. Several times, Elena's shots prevented terrorists from setting up defensive positions that could have inflicted heavy casualties on the assault forces. During the battle, Elena discovered that her legendary shot had accomplished more than just eliminating Volkov. The briefcase had contained not only nuclear materials, but also detailed plans for coordinated terrorist attacks on 5 major cities. These documents revealed that the nuclear terrorism threat was far more extensive than intelligence agencies had realized. Elena's shot had prevented multiple attacks that could have killed hundreds of thousands of people. As dawn broke over the mountains, the facility was finally secured. Elena counted 17 terrorists killed or captured, along with enough nuclear material to build several dirty bombs. The operation had been a complete success, but Elena knew that the full implications of what she had prevented would not be understood for years to come. Elena carefully disassembled her rifle and prepared to leave her sniper position. The extreme cold had taken a physical toll, and she was exhausted from maintaining constant vigilance for over 48 hours. However, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that her years of training and preparation had culminated in preventing a nuclear catastrophe. Major Volkov approached Elena as she packed her equipment. He congratulated her on achieving what military historians would likely consider the most significant sniper shot in modern warfare. The 7,000-meter shot under extreme conditions would become legendary among special operations forces, but it would remain classified for national security reasons. Elena's teammates gathered around her as they prepared to leave the mountains. They had witnessed something extraordinary and knew that Elena had just performed one of the most remarkable feats in military history. However, due to the classified nature of their mission, Elena's achievement would never be publicly recognized or recorded in official military records. The helicopter extraction went smoothly, and Elena found herself thinking about the nuclear materials that had been recovered. Laboratory analysis would later confirm that the materials were weapons-grade and sufficient to construct multiple improvised nuclear devices. The terrorist organization had been planning to use these devices in coordinated attacks during an international peace summit attended by world leaders. Elena realized that her single shot had changed the course of history in ways that most people would never know. The nuclear attacks that had been prevented would have killed countless innocent people and potentially triggered a global conflict. Elena's marksmanship had literally saved the world, but she could never tell anyone about her role in preventing the catastrophe. As the helicopter flew away from the mountains, Elena looked back at the facility where her legendary shot had taken place. She understood that this moment would define her career and her life. Elena had proved that women could perform at the highest levels of military service, even though few people would ever know about her achievement. Elena also thought about the responsibility that came with her exceptional abilities. She had been given a rare gift for marksmanship, and she had used it to protect innocent people from those who would do them harm. Elena knew that there would be other missions and other opportunities to use her skills in service of her country and humanity. 5 years after her legendary mountain shot, Elena had become something of a legend within the classified world of international counterterrorism operations. Her reputation extended beyond her marksmanship abilities to include tactical planning and training expertise. Elena had participated in dozens of missions preventing weapons proliferation and had trained elite snipers from 17 different countries in advanced long-range techniques. Elena's influence on modern sniper doctrine was profound, even though it remained completely classified. Military academies around the world incorporated techniques she had developed without knowing their origin. Elena had proven that ultra-long-range shots were possible under combat conditions, revolutionizing how military planners approached certain types of operations. Her mountain shot had become a case study in advanced ballistics, though the specific details remained highly classified. The international team Elena worked with had evolved into a permanent organization dedicated to preventing nuclear terrorism. They operated with resources and authority that crossed national boundaries, allowing them to respond quickly to emerging threats anywhere in the world. Elena had become one of the organization's most valuable assets, capable of ending threats that conventional military forces could not address effectively. Elena's personal life had stabilized within the constraints of her classified existence. She had formed close friendships with other operatives who understood the sacrifices required for their work. Elena found that the camaraderie among people who shared similar secrets created bonds that were deeper than normal civilian relationships. They were united by their shared commitment to protecting humanity from threats that most people never knew existed. During her 5th year with the organization, Elena received intelligence about a new threat that would test all of her abilities. A sophisticated criminal network had acquired not just nuclear materials, but also detailed plans for constructing actual nuclear weapons. This group was far more dangerous than the Shadow Collective because they had the technical expertise to build genuine nuclear bombs rather than just dirty bombs. The new threat was led by a former nuclear weapons designer named Dr. Pavel Grishkov, who had been dismissed from the government weapons program for security violations. Grishkov had spent years developing a network of experts and acquiring the materials needed to build nuclear weapons for sale to the highest bidders. Intelligence suggested that he was close to completing several weapons that would be sold to terrorist organizations. Elena studied everything known about Grishkov and his organization. Unlike previous targets, Grishkov was extremely security conscious and rarely appeared in locations where he could be targeted by conventional military action. Elena realized that stopping him would require an even more challenging shot than her legendary mountain operation, possibly under conditions that were deliberately designed to prevent sniper attacks. Intelligence reports indicated that Grishkov was planning to conduct a demonstration of one of his nuclear weapons for potential buyers. The demonstration would involve detonating a small nuclear device in a remote location to prove that his weapons were genuine and functional. Elena understood that preventing this demonstration was crucial because a successful test would likely result in multiple sales of nuclear weapons to terrorist groups. The demonstration was scheduled to take place in a remote desert location that offered natural protection from most forms of military intervention. Elena's team spent weeks analyzing satellite images and intelligence reports to understand the security measures Grishkov had implemented. The location appeared to be designed specifically to prevent the kind of long-range sniper attack that Elena specialized in performing. Elena realized that stopping Grishkov would require her to attempt a shot at a distance exceeding 10,000 meters under desert conditions that included extreme heat, wind, and visibility challenges. No sniper in history had ever attempted such a shot under operational conditions. Elena would be pushing the absolute limits of current technology and human capability. The preparation for the desert operation was more intensive than anything Elena had previously experienced. She trained in similar desert environments to understand how heat and wind patterns would affect her shots. Elena worked with weapons engineers to modify her rifle for the extreme range and environmental conditions she would face. Every component of her equipment had to be optimized for performance at the edge of what was physically possible. Elena also prepared mentally for what might be the most important shot of her career. If she succeeded, she would prevent nuclear weapons from being sold to terrorist organizations that would use them against civilian populations. If she failed, multiple nuclear devices would likely be used in attacks on major cities around the world. The stakes were even higher than they had been during the mountain operation. The desert mission required Elena to infiltrate enemy territory and establish a shooting position without being detected by Grishkov's security forces. She would have to remain hidden for up to a week while waiting for the optimal moment to take her shot. Elena understood that this mission would test every skill she had developed during her years of service. Elena arrived at her desert position 3 days before the scheduled demonstration. She had to dig a concealed hide in rocky terrain while avoiding detection by patrol aircraft and ground sensors. The desert heat was punishing during the day, and Elena had to carefully manage her water consumption and physical condition to remain effective when the moment came to shoot. Through her scope, Elena observed the construction of Grishkov's demonstration site. She could see the nuclear device being assembled and tested by technicians who clearly understood nuclear weapons technology. Elena realized that this was not a crude improvised device, but a sophisticated nuclear weapon that could cause massive destruction if it fell into the wrong hands. On the day of the demonstration, Elena watched through her scope as potential buyers arrived at the site. She recognized several individuals from intelligence photographs as leaders of known terrorist organizations. Elena understood that these people were preparing to purchase weapons that would be used to kill countless innocent people in terrorist attacks around the world. Elena made her final preparations as Grishkov appeared to begin the demonstration. At over 10,000 meters, her target was barely visible even through her advanced scope. Elena would have to rely entirely on her training, experience, and the specialized equipment she carried. This shot would determine whether nuclear weapons became available to terrorist organizations or whether humanity would be protected from this ultimate threat. Elena controlled her breathing and heart rate using techniques perfected over years of training and combat experience. She calculated wind conditions, temperature effects, and the dozens of other variables that could affect her shot. Elena understood that she was attempting something that had never been done before and might never be possible again. As Grishkov raised his hand to signal the beginning of the nuclear demonstration, Elena exhaled slowly and squeezed her trigger. The shot that would determine the fate of millions of innocent people traveled across the desert toward its target, carrying with it the hopes of a world that would never know how close it had come to nuclear catastrophe.